This Sunday is Palm Sunday, which is arguably one of my most favorite liturgies in the whole church calendar. It's when we commemorate Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem on his last week. Important to our understanding of the story is the topography of Jerusalem itself. We always mark that Jesus comes down the Mount of Olives. He descends into the city, but at the base of the Mount of Olives is the Kidron Valley. And from there, Jesus must ascend back up to get into Jerusalem, back up to Mount Moriah and the temple, back up to the site of his crucifixion and burial, back up to the empty tomb. We think of Holy Week as bracketed by Palm Sunday and Easter, but if we also think of it as bracketed by two mountains in a valley, then we also see that Jesus quite literally descends before he ascends again. Curious to me is the location of the Garden of Gethsemane. Where is it? It's in the base of the valley. This is where Jesus spends his last night, his holy night, arguing with his disciples and debating with his Father. He is very emotional in this moment. He's quite raw and upset. And he prays to God, Father, take this cup from me if you will, but let it be your will and not my will. And by the end of that prayer, Jesus is set on what he must do. Often I think of Jesus being at his most vulnerable on the cross. And indeed, by Good Friday, Jesus is very vulnerable on that cross. But I think we see him most emotionally vulnerable there in the valley on the night before, in the Garden of Gethsemane, where he is wrestling with what he is called to do. I think, and perhaps you might think as well, that things are going to get a little worse before they get better. And we find ourselves on the front end of this virus and of this pandemic, wrestling with our new situation in reality, but I think all the more fearing what is to come. What if, in fact, we are in the Garden of Gethsemane, and we're in that place now where we're wrestling with our fate? My hope is that in this Holy Week, as we retrace Jesus' descent and ascent back up from the empty tomb and ascent back up to the living, that we also maybe see our descent and eventual ascent. That maybe now we are in the Garden of Gethsemane. We are in the depths of that valley, wrestling with what we are called to do. But if we set our hearts on it this week, if we set our hearts on trusting in God and serving one another, loving one another, being patient with one another in this brave new world, then I think we can begin the work of setting forward on our ascent out of the valley, ascent back up, ascent to where our Father is calling us. And we'll do that knowing that with God, the only way to get out is up.